Right now, if you switch off the lights in your room, the darkness still feels temporary. You know the switch is nearby. You know the walls are around you. You know you can leave in seconds. But a deep cave is different. In a cave with no daylight, no moonlight, and no clear path back, darkness is not just the absence of light. It becomes a physical problem. It bends distance. It breaks orientation. It turns breathing, movement, and memory into survival skills. And the strange part is this: ancient humans went into that world anyway. Not for a minute, not by accident, sometimes for hundreds of meters, sometimes for miles. That raises a much bigger question. Why would anyone enter a place that cold, black, and dangerous in the first place? And how did they keep moving without choking on smoke or getting trapped in their own fire? The answer is not one trick. It is a whole chain of solutions, and once you see it clearly, caves stop looking like empty holes in the ground. They start looking like one of the places where human intelligence learned to organize itself under pressure. To understand why, you have to start with the cave itself. A cave is not just a room underground. It is an environment with its own air movement, its own temperature shifts, and often its own pockets of poor ventilation. Smoke does not simply disappear there. It can hang in place, build up, and make a cave unusable very quickly. That is why the use of fire underground was never a casual thing. Researchers studying Paleolithic caves have shown that smoke dispersal depends on cave structure, opening size, hearth placement, and even seasonal temperature differences. In other words, if ancient humans wanted to go deep into caves, they had to solve an air problem before they ever solved an art problem. The earliest reliable evidence already shows how far back this problem goes. In Bruniquel Cave in southwestern France, archaeologists documented ring-like constructions made from broken stalagmites deep underground and dated them to around 176,000 years ago. The builders were early Neanderthals. The exact purpose of the structures is still debated, so we should not invent a story for them. But the meaning of the discovery is still enormous. Humans were organizing activity deep inside a dark cave long before the classic image of the cave dweller even existed. This was not a random stumble into darkness. It was planned access, in a place far from daylight. Now think about what that implies. If people were entering deep cave zones so early, they were already doing three things at once: remembering routes, managing fire, and cooperating in groups. No one could do that alone for long in a pitch-black maze. One person had to carry light. Another had to watch the path. Someone had to remember where the entrance was. Someone had to decide where the air was better and where smoke would kill the experience. The first cave journeys were not just journeys. They were coordinated acts of trust. And then the evidence gets even more specific. In Basura Cave in northern Italy, researchers reconstructed an Upper Paleolithic exploration event about 14,000 years ago. The cave preserves human footprints, animal traces, and signs that a small group entered together: 2 adults, an adolescent, and 2 children. They were barefoot. They had to crawl in parts of the cave, and they carried bundles of small pine sticks for light. Experimental work later showed that these small branches could give enough light for safe movement while limiting oxygen consumption and reducing the glare of larger flames. That is not a random detail. It shows that ancient humans were not just surviving underground. They were adapting their lighting to the underground environment itself. That alone would be remarkable. But here is the deeper shift. Basura shows that cave exploration was not always the work of elite specialists or isolated adults. Children were part of it. Family groups were part of it. That means deep cave movement was not simply a desperate technical act. It was social behavior. It involved training, roles, and collective confidence. When a 3-year-old is present in an underground expedition, the story stops being only about light. It becomes a story about what a community thought was worth doing together in the dark. Another French cave pushes the same idea in a different direction. In Chauvet Cave, archaeologists documented a human trail in the depths of the gallery system. Around 20 footprints spread over about 70 meters have been interpreted as belonging to an adolescent moving barefoot through a low passage. Even more striking, charcoal smears on the walls appear to have been placed deliberately in the opposite direction of the path, likely to help mark the way back. So this was not just movement through darkness. It was navigation. The cave itself became a space where memory had to be written onto the wall. Now it gets interesting, because that means the cave was not empty. It was being read. Human beings were using walls, smears, footprints, and turns in the passage as signs. In a lit room, you do not need a map in your head. In a cave, you do. And that changes the entire mental world of the people inside it. A deep cave is one of the earliest places where humans had to combine body memory, path memory, and light management at the same time. The result was not just survival, it was spatial thinking under pressure. Researchers studying Paleolithic lighting systems have identified 3 major kinds of illumination: wooden torches, portable fat lamps, and fireplaces. Each one solved a different problem. Torches helped people move. Lamps gave steadier light. Fireplaces helped at fixed spots, but smoke made them risky in enclosed spaces. The important point is that ancient humans were not using one universal solution. They were choosing between technologies based on the task, the cave layout, and the cost of the smoke. That is what makes this history bigger than the title. It is not just how did they get light. It is how did they build a whole decision system around fire, darkness, and air. Cueva de Nerja in Spain shows how long that kind of decision-making could last. Recent research there identified remains of multiple lighting systems, including torches, fires, and fixed lamps, along with charcoal and soot in the deep galleries. The cave also preserves evidence of repeated prehistoric visits over tens of thousands of years. That matters because it shows these were not one-time heroic journeys. People kept coming back. They returned to the same interior spaces, generation after generation, meaning the dark underground had become part of a cultural routine, not just a dangerous exception. Cueva de Ardales adds another layer. Research on this cave in southern Spain has shown repeated Paleolithic and Neanderthal activity, including symbolic markings deep inside the cave. The site matters because it pushes the story beyond simple shelter or exploration. These were not people only trying to stay alive. They were returning underground to do things that carried meaning. Once again, the real question is not whether they could enter the cave. It is why the cave was worth the effort, the danger, and the light. And then there is Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, where Native American groups traveled far underground with river cane torches. The National Park Service says there is evidence they went more than 19 miles into the cave and journeyed there for about 3,000 years. That is a staggering distance in darkness, and it destroys the lazy idea that ancient cave use was always small-scale or primitive. In Mammoth Cave, people were not merely standing near an entrance. They were pushing deep into one of the largest cave systems on Earth with a lighting technology that had to work, fail, and be replaced along the way. Now zoom out for a moment. When you connect Bruniquel, Basura, Chauvet, Sharjah, Ardales, and Mammoth Cave, a pattern appears. Different cultures, different regions, and different time periods all face the same 3 enemies underground: darkness, smoke, and disorientation. Their answers were not identical, but they shared the same logic. Keep the flames small enough to survive. Place fire where air can carry the smoke away. Mark the path. Use the right light for the right task. Return often enough that the cave becomes familiar. This is what practical intelligence looks like before science gives it a name. Think about the wider consequence of that. Once humans could move underground in a controlled way, caves stopped being only natural spaces. They became shelters, ritual spaces, workspaces, art spaces, and memory spaces. They were also archives. Deep caves preserve footprints, charcoal, soot, and marks that open air would destroy. That is why so much of what we know about prehistoric behavior survives there. The cave world did not just receive human history, it stored it. And because of that, cave navigation helped shape not only behavior in the past, but the way archaeologists can reconstruct that past today. The modern connection is sharper than it looks. Cave scientists still study ventilation, CO2, and airflow because caves are living systems with changing air conditions. In other words, the same basic problem remains. In enclosed spaces, air matters as much as light. Today, cave researchers measure what ancient humans solved by instinct, experimentation, and repetition. Modern miners, rescue teams, and cave explorers still depend on the same principles too. Light must be portable, air must be understood, routes must be marked. Darkness still punishes mistakes. The technology changed, but the logic did not. So the next time you imagine an ancient human stepping into a cave, do not picture a confused figure wandering helplessly into blackness. Picture a group. Picture a small flame. Picture smoke that had to be managed. Picture children walking with adults. Picture footprints pressed into mud. Picture charcoal marks on a wall pointing the way back. Picture people who understood, without microscopes or laboratory language, that darkness was not only something to fear, it was something to be organized. Right now, a room can go dark with one flick of a switch. That feels ordinary because modern life hides the cost of the light. But behind that ordinary switch is a much older human story. The story of entering places where the air was heavy, the path was unclear, and the darkness was real enough to swallow a person whole. Ancient humans did not defeat caves by brute force. They learned to move inside them. And that skill was bigger than the cave itself. Because once humans learned how to cross darkness without suffocating in fear or smoke, they had taken another step toward civilization. You started with a simple question about how people got through the dark. What was hidden behind it was one of the oldest lessons in human history. Survival was never just about endurance. It was about learning how to make the impossible place